Welcome to In the Funnel. My name is Mark Cox. In the Funnel is a group of sales coaches and consultants that help B2B sales teams dramatically improve revenue. Clients come to us when revenue growth is stagnated, or their sales team is not meeting expectations, or they need to recalibrate their sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. Our clients have enjoyed tremendous success working within the funnel, and please hear it straight from them by listening to the testimonial section of this website. What they'll tell you is there's two things that make us unique and different in our space. Number one, we have a process and a methodology. First, for understanding your current state, and then second, for building your sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. The second thing that makes us unique and different is that everybody within the funnel has run a material sales organization in their recent past. We're all practitioners. We don't have any theorists or teachers, and what that means is we can get in front of your sales team and run the next sales meeting, or join them on their next sales call to close your next large prospect. All of us have a passion for professional, disciplined, process-driven sales, and we'd be delighted to talk to you if you're looking to grow revenue for your company. Please feel free to reach out to us through this website at info@inthefunnel.com or by telephone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.
We've all heard the cute quotes, you learn more from your failures than your successes, right?
Right, it's in the front of our notebooks.
Oh yeah, and yet everybody avoids it like the plague. And the joke I always make is that if you really have a failure culture, then why don't you do what you see in success culture? So you walk into an office building, you go into their office, they got a success wall, company of the year, CEO of the year, supplier of the year. And so where's the failure wall? Mm-hmm. We failed, but here's the 10 lessons we learned that set us up better for the next opportunity. We actually aren't practicing what we preach there. And, and even in coaching sessions or in group sales meetings, the question should be asked, okay, this meeting, again, the agenda, come prepared to share a failure and the lesson you've learned. Now, if you can't get the lesson learned, that's what can be helpful as a manager. Well, what's the lesson learned here? Well, here's what I think you learned. So, but we're not embracing it. We're not modeling that behavior.
Team, we've got a great show for you today. We're talking about emotional intelligence with Colleen Stanley, and she is really a thought leader in this space. She's the president of SalesLeadership, Inc., sales coaching organization. She's also the author of two great books on emotional intelligence. One's called Emotional Intelligence for Sales Success, Connect with Customers and Get Results. And the second is called Emotional Intelligence for Sales Leadership, The Secret to Building High-Performance Sales Teams. And we get into that today. There's really four parameters of emotional intelligence out there that you start to think about, four filters. One, self-management. So you're able to control impulsive feelings and behaviors and really manage your emotions in healthy ways. Then there's self-awareness. You recognize your emotions and how they affect your thoughts and behaviors, so you know what's going on with you. Social awareness would be the third one, where you have empathy. You can understand the emotions, the needs, and the concerns of other people. And then you pick up on these emotional cues and feel comfortable adapting to them. And then finally, relationship management. You know how to develop and maintain good relationships. You communicate clearly. You inspire and influence others. And this topic is so important for all of us today. And again, as Colleen says, not just in sales, but in business and life. And if you're not in control of your emotions, we're not going to get the types of outcomes in terms of key interactions that we want. So just a great topic today. I'm sure you're going to be delighted to meet Colleen. I know I was. And today's podcast certainly is in keeping with our mission to provide you with some value that you can apply to the way you sell today, tomorrow, and the next day. Here's Colleen Stanley. Enjoy. Hey, Colleen, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me as your guest, Mark.
Well, I was really excited to chat with you today, Colleen, for a couple of reasons. First of all, you've got this great background in terms of sales training with Sandler and Vistage and others, get a wonderful career in sales. But this topic of emotional intelligence is just so critical always, not just for sales, but in everything. And we're always fond of saying, Colleen, within the funnel, we always come up with the saying that says sales leadership's either the best or worst job in the company.
Right.
And the three things that make it the best or the worst job in the company: your team, the culture, the sales culture, and your sales management system. But that team is such a big one. So before we dive into what everybody's going to be super interested today, this topic of emotional intelligence, tell us a little bit about your background and your journey in professional sales.
So, Mark, I had the really, and I mean, I'm going to emphasize the word really, good fortune of starting with a small company. Now, back in the day, I didn't know that was referred to as a startup, correct?
Right.
And so it was a small company. And we were really the David in the David and Goliath story. Our biggest competitor was 8 times our size. They had more marketing, more branding, probably triple the size of reps on the street. However, what we had was a lot of heart. And frankly, in my opinion, we had a much better product. So that beginning, why it was so important for me, is that when you start with a small company, if you show up with good work ethic, passion, you're coachable, you get promoted even before you're ready to be promoted. So I sold for 4 years, was a regional manager, got promoted to vice president of sales and marketing. And then after that journey, then I did get into this business in which I've been here for 22 years now. Mm-hmm.
And that must have been great fun. Varsity Brands was that company you were talking about at the beginning, starting
Yes.
off and selling the apparel into colleges, universities. Always staying connected into that academic world always seems a lot of fun to me.
It is. And what was interesting, it's today it's a company that posts revenues of over 5 billion because they are now the school spirit company. And of course, I'm such a fan of education as you are, because you wouldn't be in this business. And so just the work they're doing to make sure that they're bringing in social and emotional intelligence training now, along with all the products and services they sell to the schools. So yeah, it was a really great start for me. So had lots of good mentors, lots of good bosses. So I don't have any of those stories about bad culture or anything like that, unfortunately. So I know the power of a good culture. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And hey, fortunately.
Right.
So as we jump into the key topic today, this emotional intelligence. And, I think it's such an important topic, first of all, for all of us, from our own growth perspective, understanding what it is. Let's start there. There's so many different definitions out there all the time, Colleen, on emotional intelligence. Give us the plain Jane explanation of what is it?
And I'm glad you asked for the plain Jane, because I think what happens with emotional intelligence, at this point, we all know it's important, but it just gets so theoretical. And the only way you're going to incorporate these skills into your organization is to make it practical. So I'll start with a very practical, simple definition, and it really falls under the umbrella of emotional self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So it's really knowing often what emotions you're feeling, why you're feeling those emotions, and how those affect how you show up. It's also being very cognizant of the emotions that another person might be thinking or feeling. So it's really a lot of self-awareness and other awareness, and then being able to execute the right behaviors you want every day, whether it's in sales, life, or business.
Got it. Okay. And give us some indicators of somebody who's got, a high degree of emotional intelligence, perhaps an example as a sales leader with an example, and maybe someone with a lower degree of emotional intelligence, an example, and maybe the implications.
So with sales leadership, or with anyone we work with, generally the first skill I work, teach, try to improve on is the skill of emotion management. Because as a mentor once told me, if you are not stable, you are not able, right? So you can read all the great leadership works, you can read all the great sales books, but if you're allowing emotions to start running conversations and interactions, you don't show up as a great leader or a great salesperson.
Yeah.
And Mark, when I was in corporate, I had when I became a vice president, I had 7 regional managers that reported to me. And it was kind of interesting. I quickly learned there were what I call fair weather managers and all weather managers. And the all weather managers are, whether it's, snow, sleet, hail, sunshine, they get the job done. My fair weather managers, and I only had 2, fortunately, they were really good until there was a problem. And then you know what happened? Their emotions, they get angry, they start blaming, making excuses. So not only did we have the problem we were trying to solve, I had the other problem of managing them.
Right.
So I would say in leadership, you've really got to make a decision. Are you going to be an all-weather manager or a fair weather? But that boils down to how you manage your emotions. So that's one example.
And so, when we start thinking why this is so important, there's a perfect example. It's so important because, of course, there is going to be lots of different type of weather.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
So when we're a salesperson or when we're a sales leader managing a team, that concept of balance, being able to manage with balance and intelligence and maybe expanding the time from stimuli to response.
Right.
So I think, when I grew up playing a violent sport, hockey, and there's not a lot of time between, stimuli and reaction.
Yes.
You're not even thinking about what you're doing before you react. But I think as maturity grows up, you have a little bit longer of a period of time there. So if we take it from this sales management perspective, so I'm a sales leader. Let's start with my sales team. Clearly, I'm going to want folks who are emotionally intelligent based on, that quick example you just gave. But why else is being able to spot emotional intelligence and maybe even cultivate it? Why is it so important to have that on the members of my sales team?
So you just said 2 words that were really important that I want your audience to hear: spot it and develop it. See, you can come in with a degree of emotional intelligence. We'll talk about how to maybe interview and vet for that. But know as a leader, you are going to be charged with developing it. I mean, mine is developed over the years. Thank goodness it needed to, by the way. Okay. So let's say, here's where I see the disconnect happening. If you take a look at typical hiring processes, we vet, interview for the hard selling skills. And that could be number of years of selling experience. Do they have industry experience? Matching sales cycles. Did they have a long sales cycle, short sales cycle? What was the average deal size? So you're doing what I call vetting the resume and the experience. However, if you look at most interview guides, they are not vetting salespeople for the soft skills, emotional intelligence skills. Yeah. So let's just take one. Assertiveness, which according to the research has been found in some of your top salespeople. So how do you actually interview for assertiveness? Because that is a soft skill, an EQ skill. Well, an interview question might be, Mark, tell me about a time when you had a customer that changed the scope of the project, however, did not want to pay for the projects, the change in the scope. Tell me how you handled that. And right there, you're going to get a demonstration of assertiveness or not. A delayed gratification is a huge one in sales, because if a salesperson doesn't possess delayed gratification, for example, they really never get masterful, because when you look at masterful salespeople, masterful sales managers, they will put in the work, the practice, the study, the hours that are behind mastery. So you can ask a question. Tell me about the toughest goal you set. Tell me about a goal that took you the longest to achieve. So I encourage everyone, yes, vet and interview for the hard selling skills, and vet and interview for the soft skills, emotional intelligence skills.
Well, I think you've touched on a couple of things there with sales management, and no disrespect to anybody listening at all. But generally, I think most sales leaders out there today, they don't actually think about the interview questions before an interview, based on the research. And generally, if there's multiple people involved in interviewing a particular candidate, they have no process. They have no system. So whether 3 different people interview somebody and ask the same sort of questions, or whether a senior executive believes that there's such a great identifier of talent
Right.
that they can sit down and have a coffee with someone and tell if they're going to be a good fit for the organization. And of course, both are wrong. For folks listening today, a couple of reference points that might be of interest. Just Smart's got a great book called Who.
Yes.
And,
Just
and
recommended it to a client.
oh, did you?
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a family thing. Like his dad was also in the same industry.
Yeah, his dad wrote the book, and another great book, Top Grading, quite a
Right.
bit thicker. Both are excellent. And, Mark, you bring up such an important point. I mean, you and I both, you're in sales enablement, sales training, sales management like myself. Here's what I will tell CEOs and sales managers. None of that matters until you get your hiring process figured out, because it's the difference between heaven and hell, in my opinion, because, I can't coach a non-coachable salesperson.
Right.
I can't, in today's environment, you've got to really be vetting people for what I call in the EQ world, self-actualization. Translate that to the plain Jane, people that have the aptitude and attitude towards learning.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not vetting for some of these skills, you can bring in all of these systems, processes, training, and it's not the facilitator that's falling short. We don't have the right people, as Jim Collins would say, in the seat.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Well, when you do this for a living and you see lots and lots of different people, there's a huge difference in terms of, and you know this, Colleen, when you walk in a room, some people want to learn, or some people are kind of interested in identifying exactly what's wrong with whatever system it is you're talking or speaking
exactly.
about. I'll give you the two examples, and in 20 years of selling, I'm going to give you the two examples where that wouldn't work. So there's this big difference, Carol Dweck and others, in terms of growth versus fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to be right or wrong. And I always like the terms life, a know-it-all versus a learn-it-all. I forget where we picked that one up.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that was also, I think it was Ryan Gottfredson, who's also doing some work in terms of growth orientation. But to break it down, I guess, for the folks listening, we're hiring, we're interviewing today, tomorrow, the next day. Clearly trying to find someone who's growth oriented, self-actualized. How do we, what are samples of questions other questions you might ask during an interview to help somebody listening today that they can take away and apply in their next interview? And I'll share a couple we like too.
Okay. One would be, because you can gather data from other things they've done in their life, because let's say you've got a brand new seller, right?
Yeah.
You can be in an SDR role, inside sales role. So one of the things you might do is say, hey, give me an example of something that you've studied, put the time into, where you feel like you'd almost be called an expert. And again, that tells you the person's curious. And then you could ask a follow-up question. So who inspired you to do the study? Because what I want to know is, was there some outside force that was just driving that behavior, or did they have what we call in the world of hiring motivation, intrinsic motivation there? I think for other people, it could be a simple question of, give me 2 or 3 examples of what you've done to remain an expert in your industry.
Great question.
Because it just changes so fast today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, if you don't have somebody that's got the aptitude or attitude towards learning, your company is going to be behind the 8 ball, as we call it. And it's not due to any innovation. They're just not learning what they need to do to present those new products or services to clients and prospects.
Wow, what a great question. We'll take that away and put that in the show notes, of course. But a lot of the times when we're in interviews today, some folks are saying, hey, I want industry expertise. I want to take someone who's, sold the same solution into the same target market, same ideal customer profile, all those kinds of good things. Not always the right answer.
Right.
But it certainly is something that seems to, on paper, look like a good idea. I love that question. Say, what are you doing to stay current with what's happening in the industry? Mm-hmm. And the build on that might be, what are the top 2 or 3 trends you're seeing in the industry today?
Okay. I love that question. You know why?
Why? Please.
I was just working with a group, and one of the things I believe that makes somebody a good sales leader and salesperson, you're able to see trends. You're able to see patterns. And, we all love, I think, the quote, you played hockey. Okay. Wayne Gretzky, skate where the puck is going. I don't even know if I've got the quote right. But see, if you train people to start looking for patterns and trends, they start doing the activity before it becomes apparent to any other competitor.
Yeah.
That's why I really like that question. I've actually never heard it before. So
Oh, thanks for that. And by the way, thank you for referencing Wayne Gretzky. Anybody who comes on the podcast gets a very special gift if they make any unsolicited reference to hockey throughout the course of the actual podcast. So the quote is, skate where the puck is going, not where it's at.
There you go. Okay.
So he always found he's in this weird part of the ice. And then suddenly the puck's on his stick and he scores a goal from the back of the net. So another question we always like, there's a couple of things we do in interviews. I don't even know if it's right, but I always like to ask, someone who comes in with a lot of confidence, and that exists in professional sales, particularly in an interview. I see a lot of that confidence bleed away once you hire somebody and they're 3 months into the job. But you get a lot of chutzpah in interviews, depending upon the industry you're in and so forth. But I always like to ask a question, what's the next thing you need to learn?
Oh, that's a good one.
And so for, certainly for me at my stage of my life, you ask me that question, the answer to that question is going to be 3.5 hours long. The older I get, the more it becomes evident that I know very little about anything.
Right.
And that the world of information out there that I can't wait to get my hands on is extremely vast. So I'd have some pretty quick answers to those questions, but it's interesting when it stumps someone, particularly a young person, and they say, I've never really thought about it, because they thought the interview was coming in and showing me how much they know about everything.
Absolutely.
So, kind of an interesting tweak.
Well, and with that question, I think you also might be uncovering another competency. And so the competency would be humility. Now you take that to the world of EQ, that could be self-awareness, being aware, I don't know everything, but it also could uncover the EQ skill of self-regard, the ability to admit your strengths and weaknesses. So I think you've got a lot of things that are being measured by that answer, because, people that are very confident, they do have high self-regard. However, they also have enough awareness to know, what, I'm really good here. I still need to improve here. And to me, those are great people to work with, lead, develop, co-create with. So I think that question really unpacks a lot of other attributes that you're looking for, in top performers.
Right. So it actually, I'll throw in another thought, but by the way, you probably have chatted with this fellow, but there's a wonderful fellow named Frank Cespedes. Maybe you've read one of his 7 or 8 books. He's a professor at Harvard.
Okay.
His most recent book is Sales Management, the Work, but he's, aligning strategy in sales. He's kind of the main fellow over at Harvard. Wonderfully nice fellow. Been on the podcast a couple of times. His books write about how when we're interviewing salespeople, if he was to go to the research over 20 or 25 years, at best, it's a coin toss. So he said, at best, it's flipping a coin. And I got to be honest with the folks listening here today, I'm probably a little better than that, but not a lot. So this ability to, to be able to effectively interview, to get someone who's going to fit in with the company, the culture, the industry, be a lifelong learner, it's a difficult thing. And churn in sales is ridiculously high right now. So it appears most roles, couple of years, and there's churn.
Yes. And it's a curiosity point for me here. And this is where many people listening will disagree with me. When you have somebody that maybe is in the 20s, okay, they're going to be what I call the job hopper. They're trying to figure it out. Sometimes they land in an SDR role, but they're ready to be an account executive, move up the ladder. So there's some reason for the job hopping. However, when I start seeing that in their 30s and 40s, it often makes me wonder, when the tough gets going, do they get going?
Right.
And I have had people push back on that, saying, no, this is just the way the world is. Well, Mark, I don't know about you, but my anecdotal research, when I look around at my very successful CEOs, VPs of sales, they aren't job hoppers, because
Right.
it takes years sometimes to get that deep domain of expertise. Again, that expertise is changing. So it is interesting. I think you have to be very careful when the outside world is saying, we need to accept this. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know if we need to accept it. Maybe we need to get better at lining up with schools that actually have universities that have sales minors and sales majors, because then you've got young professionals coming in that realize sales is a profession. This is just isn't a stopgap job. This is a profession where you can make a difference. You can make a really nice living for you and your family. So I'd caution people that are starting to accept the 2-year. Yes, in your 20s, and that's backed by research. You tend to job hop because you just don't know what you're doing or really what you like.
Well, I completely agree, by the way. And I think the other factor that's influenced that strongly has been, as venture capital goes into technology startups and they're building bigger and bigger farms of SDR organizations, and they're scaling sales organizations to play the SaaS valuation model. So growth rate plus EBIT has got to equal 40. So if we just have an insane growth rate and just keep growing, then I can triple, double the business and turn $1 million of ARR into $1 billion. Seems great on paper, but all of it means scale and sales and marketing. So I just think there's been way more people going into sales. They don't get the training. They don't get the coaching. They don't get the guidance or leadership. So they're in and out. And I think it's terrible on those poor people, because they might be their first professional job and they're not successful. I think it's awful on the clients and prospects, because they're getting lower end professionals reaching out and just polluting social media and confusing all this messaging. So now we're just avoiding salespeople more than ever. And then of course, the sales management job becomes, or the VP sales job quickly becomes the worst job in any company. And so they're leaving quickly too. So
yeah,
I happen to think that a good portion of this, Colleen, though, is going to change with 8 to 10% inflation. And one of our last guests, who I always feel like I have to study up even more with some members of the academic community, but Herman Simon founded Simon Kucher and Partners, 37 books on pricing and value.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he reminded me that inflation of 8 to 10% takes 10 years to go away.
Wow. That's a compelling piece of data.
So yeah, he brought up this great point for everybody listening that said, this will be the actual podcast right before yours, Colleen's. But he brought up this point that says, hey, last time we had 8 to 10% inflation was mid-1970s. Nobody who was in management then is still in business today, except me. That's what he said as a joke about himself. He's a slightly older gentleman. So he said, I'm the only one who's still around. And then I said, how long does it last? He said, when you're trying to weasel down the money supply, because we threw so much money, printed money during COVID, printed money during the financial crisis, you can't get it out of there fast enough. It takes 10 years.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so when we think of this insane job market might cool off a bit. And I think there might be a little bit of less of this job hopping around, particularly in sales. And this will give us an opportunity to increase that level of performance and professionalism for those who are intellectually curious and want it. As you say, they want to stay, they want to continue to learn, they want to develop a craft and become that true professional, versus going after that next shiny object.
And that's often what it is. The grass always looks greener on the other side of the fence. However, I want to come back to a point you made, Mark, because this training, the coaching, right? And so I'm going to direct this message to any CEOs that are listening. Sometimes you're the problem. Okay, and let me explain why. So if you think about it, and you're very savvy on the financial and business acumen, much more than most people I actually talk to. So thank you for that.
I'm glad it appears that way. Yeah.
Well, I've got a pretty good reality testing. Okay. Yeah. And so here's what happens in corporate America. They are always measuring financial metrics. Now, I'm all about it. Numbers don't lie. Know your numbers. However, here's what I see happening with a lot of VPs of sales or sales managers. They get so hung up on the numbers that they do a lot of deal review. They do not spend enough time on deal coaching. Coaching changes the numbers. Now, here's the other thing. They are not measured on the number of coaching sessions they hold. So we're always reporting our financial metrics. I'm going to encourage CEOs somewhere along the line, somebody needs to be measuring, is a consistent coaching cadence happening? Now, you can have it happen, but also give your managers some training on coaching. I don't know about you, Mark, but I was always a fairly good teacher, I think. I knew nothing about coaching.
Right.
I didn't know the difference between teaching and coaching. One is imparting knowledge, one is making sure it lands. So for organizations, start measuring another set of metrics. Make your company a coaching organization. That changes numbers. That changes behaviors. So that would be my encouragement to anybody listening today.
Oh, by the way, great coaching for anybody listening, great education. Let's unpack that a little bit, Colleen, because I actually don't think those key points you make, I don't think they're commonly understood. So let's use an example and see if we can help here a little bit, but it's just so important. First of all, coaching's a profession. Coaching,
Absolutely.
a skill and approach and profession. And if anybody listening here, obviously, Colleen's got two wonderful books that we're going to all want to go and read. One is Emotional Intelligence for Sales Leadership, The Secret to Building High-Performance Sales Teams. The second is Emotional Intelligence for Sales Success. That was actually Colleen's first book, Connect with Customers and Get Results. So we want to think about, reading these books, understanding emotional intelligence so we can be better with our team. But let me paint a picture of a typical sales leader scenario, Colleen, and then maybe you can let me know what part of this was coaching. So I'm a sales leader. I'm checking my metrics. I've got a pre-scheduled one-on-one. I got 30 days left in the quarter and I'm starting to sweat. So in comes my top salesperson, Jackie D. And Jackie's got a lot of good attributes, a lot of negative attributes, but because I'm already starting to sweat in terms of the sales team, he comes in for a one-on-one.
Okay.
We go right into Salesforce and we start talking about deals because I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to tell him so we can close a deal so that we can actually get it in before the end of the quarter and maybe I get to keep my job past the end of the quarter. Where on that continuum has any coaching taken place at all?
There was zero going on. Okay. Now, and this is what I think, in fairness to sales leaders, they're taught that deal review, as I said, looking at the analytics is coaching. So there's a couple of things I'm seeing, and obviously you are as well. Number one, my philosophy is the salesperson should be driving that conversation. In many cases, you'll see the sales manager sometimes even pull the report, they look at the data, they spot the trends and patterns. And as you said before, that's what we're hoping to have the salesperson understand. So I would suggest here that the manager sends out the agenda ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to go look at the analytics. However, please come prepared with this set of data. What are the patterns and trends you're seeing? What are the 3 ideas you have to get deals unstuck, disqualify? Let's discuss deals that should not have even been in the pipeline. I can't even tell you how many deals should never even been put in the sales funnel. So the idea is to turn a deal review analytical meeting into a deal coaching meeting. And then from there might be certain skills that then the manager would go into training and then coaching. So maybe the sales rep, the training didn't land, so they can't execute it on a call. You teach it and then you coach it to see if they can actually say and do what you just taught. So it could be a variety of things in that coaching call, but that is simply, it's a roll call meeting is what I call it. And there's no learning or change that's going to happen from that.
Thank you, by the way. Great analysis there and great learning for everybody. I love why don't you come into the meeting with the 3 ideas of how you're going to get those top deals unstuck? Because I think a lot of us train our teams to come into the meeting to go, What should I do?
Right.
And
And we're the chief rescue officer.
we
Da-da-da-da.
love doing that. We love to, because the answer is screaming out in our head. And all we do is then train them to keep doing that more often.
Absolutely.
Instead of saying the hardest thing in the world is to say, I don't know. What do you think we should do?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And that is, when you take that back to the EQ world, that is having self-awareness and impulse control. Being aware of when you're becoming a professional teller, a chief rescue officer, and controlling the impulse to rescue, teach, train too soon. And frankly, it's just easier to do it the other way. I don't really, and deep down, you're sitting there going, I don't have the time to train you. I don't have the time to coach you. There's nothing more important than honoring that coaching cadence. And so that also is something you have to be aware of, a self-limiting belief that you don't have time to coach. But you seem to have time to be scrambling at the end of every quarter, trying to find deals that are going to come through. So it's kind of a crazy situation we all get into.
Yeah, such good counsel, Colleen, and thank you. And I just can't help but going back to that analogy that you started at the beginning. Usually it's me defaulting to these sports analogies, but you thankfully brought up the reference to hockey. During the week, the hockey coach isn't just letting the team do anything they want and then waiting to the game. And in the last period of the game, squeezing every player to get one more goal.
Right.
They're working every day, hard on game films, on coaching, on role plays, which is practice is just a role play.
Right.
So that when it matters, when we're in front of a customer, when we're playing hockey on the Saturday night, when it really matters, we've been coached and we've developed the skills, capabilities, knowledge to perform better in the moment, because it's a performance sport.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ignore the other 6 days of the week and just say, hey, when I'm getting close to the court, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, shoot lower left. We're developing the skills so they can't come and ask us what to do.
Right.
In a performance sport, they're on a breakaway. They're not going to stop and, like we just did with the podcast and go, okay, excuse me for a second, go over to the bench and go, should I shoot high or should I shoot low? Okay.
Right.
So I'm actually, this is the first time I've ever come up with this analogy, but I really like it, is we're trying to prepare the team so that they're enabled. So when it matters. And the other thing, I'm sorry, Colleen, please.
No, but to your point, here's what sales leaders often hear, and this is where they have to have their assertiveness. And you can talk to any group of sales managers. They'll say, okay, how many of your members of your team like role play? They don't. Okay.
Right.
What do you hear? It's all very predictable. It's not real. It's hard, some of these. And so, my standard answer, which is not a lot of EQ, by the way, I'll just look, pause, and I'll say, neither is hockey practice, neither is basketball practice. So we've got this big disconnect that we spend hours watching people that we admire for their mastery. I see Roger Federer just retired today. The hours that we know this man put in, and yet somewhere we have the disconnect in sales and business that we don't need to do the same. And it's really something you need to stop and look at, but it needs to happen all the way from the top, because again, I don't think we give enough credence to practice and coaching. And that's where I had a young man yesterday, actually, in the former company he worked with, 20% of his bonus was measured or based on the number of coaching hours he actually conducted. That's a company that's serious.
Wow. Talk about a forward-thinking company.
Absolutely.
And you and I were talking prior to the podcast. Was this the same company with the management training before they were managers?
No, this is one of the young sales managers that's in that training, and he's coming in, good learner, but he shared that yesterday. He said, oh no, because I said, you guys, you're going to be tempted to always cut the coaching conversation.
Yeah. And
I also said, you're going to have to manage up and set expectations. When I've got a coaching session on my calendar, don't be telling me to cancel it. So sometimes the problem really comes right from the top. They don't have a coaching practice culture.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think, and it's a tough thing in a mid-sized company, because I think the culture there oftentimes is there is the battle to be the smartest person in the room. And nobody's, in a mid-sized company, you're not going to get a lot of folks who've been in their roles for 10, 15, 20 years and have total comfort as a domain expert in that particular business discipline. They're kind of growing up the chain. So you're walking into meetings always trying to show what you know. And so you're going to get a lot of people coming up with a lot of good ideas instead of, executives saying, we're actually trying to develop that lady over here, and she's on a growth journey. And so instead of spewing out the answer faster than each other can, how about we ask her what she should do? And how about we have the patience to, if we see something that doesn't make sense, let her fail.
Right.
Or let her succeed. Maybe she knows something we don't know.
Yeah. And the whole failure thing is interesting because we've all heard the cute quotes, you learn more from your failures than your successes, right?
Right. It's in the front of our notebooks.
Oh, yeah. And yet everybody avoids it like the plague. And the joke I always make is that if you really have a failure culture, then why don't you do what you see in success culture? So you walk into an office building, you go into their office, they got a success wall, company of the year, CEO of the year, supplier of the year. And so where's the failure wall? We failed, but here's the 10 lessons we learned that set us up better for the next opportunity. We actually aren't practicing what we preach there. And, and even in coaching sessions or in group sales meetings, the question should be asked, okay, this meeting, again, the agenda, come prepared to share a failure and the lesson you've learned. Now, if you can't get the lesson learned, that's what can be helpful as a manager. Well, what's the lesson learned here? Well, here's what I think you learned. So, but we're not embracing it. We're not modeling that behavior.
Oh, I'm taking that immediately, Colleen. That is such gold. Everybody listening, come into the next sales meeting with a failure and a key lesson learned to share with the team. What a spectacular way at looking at it. And I'll put my hand up, Colleen. You're right. It's easy to say this. It's hard to live it, and it is difficult to internalize it.
Yeah.
Not 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting late on a Friday. Today's a Friday for those listening. And I put in the wrong meeting at the wrong time where I knew I was going to be in the wrong mindset. But it was just a free part of the calendar. It was one of those ones where I needed good energy early in the day, and it was going to be a lot of work and all that. And everything was set up for failure, and then failure came. And, it's funny because it really ruined a part of the weekend for me, because intellectually in my mind, I'm going, failure means learning. You're human. We're going to pick up some things to get better. And then in my gut, I am so mad at myself for letting that happen. And saying, I know better. I coach on preparation. This is the worst time for this meeting. Why?
I'm an imposter.
I'm a fraud. Let's shut down the business today. There's no more, like, public apology. But all of, so it was one of those ones where your heart is battling, or your gut is battling your brain to say, listen, enjoy the weekend. You're going to grab some learning. We're going to be better. But still, there's that tendency to say, man, I'm mad at myself. And if we feel that way, sometimes we hide the failure. Or if I'm not in a psychologically safe environment as a salesperson, why would I want to bring up the failure?
Well, exactly. And because here's what can happen if they bring up the failure, the manager might go right into fixing it instead of saying, well, talk to me about that. What happened? How do you think you got there? Now, if you had to redo it, if you were in that same situation, what would you do differently? But see, here's what happens. And sales managers, for the most part, really are well-intentioned. There is no reason you get into a leadership role. In my opinion, sometimes it's, strictly climbing corporate, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you care about people, want to serve, and you actually get a kick out of people learning, changing, growing, and improving.
Right.
But without some of that emotional intelligence training, their impulse is, I'm going to help Mark. He's looking like he's feeling so bad, instead of saying, okay, well, what's the lesson learned here? And that should be a common coaching question. How will this lesson serve you moving forward? If you had to do it again, there's like 3 or 4 that could come right out of that. And I have taken more face plants, as I call it, than most human beings. However, I've had some good coaches or enough self-regard to own it and say, okay, that one's on you. You didn't prepare enough. You made the wrong choice. And then if in the reality, in life, there are just going to be things you can study, prepare. You're gonna flat out screw up. You just didn't know any better.
Mhm.
End of story. And I've had that too. So, so
The best-
it's a good principle to bring in there to get the lessons learned. And that really creates a lessons learned culture, a risk-taking culture. Let's get back in the saddle quickly culture as well.
What a great tip, team, to take away from today. And it's one thing, I mean, we're pretty good at calling it in terms of accepting blame and calling out our failures. There's no question I make more mistakes personally than the average human being and professionally. But I also have the comfort of knowing I'm in a different stage of life. It doesn't, I'm okay showing those flaws. And, there's no real implication. If we're working with a client, we make a mistake, we tell the truth, there's no implication. I think I'm highly empathetic to young salespeople starting in their career. Certain cultures aren't as forgiving.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried that people don't get comfortable with this and they get taught it because it's not a psychologically safe place. And I think that's something for the sales leaders here to think about. How do we create that? But
Right.
boy, today, if this podcast is about improving the performance and professionalism of sales and helping people with what they're doing today and tomorrow. Colleen, you've just added a ton of really practical advice that we can apply right away. So thank you for joining our podcast today. It's been such a pleasure meeting you.
Well, and thank you for putting in the work of hosting these podcasts. I know it is not easy. Thank your team. I think it was my computer, by the way, that was locking up. So not yours. So anyway, thank you for that.
The listeners,
you were demonstrating the EQ skill of flexibility. New information is coming in. I need to adapt.
Hey, we've got people who will deal with all that kind of great stuff. We have to take care of the talent, Colleen. You're the talent. And because of that, by the way, lots of folks listening today are going to want to learn a little more. How do they learn more about you?
Probably the first place to go to, Mark, is our website, which is salesleadershipdevelopment.com. Lots of free resources on there. We actually have some EQ assessment tools for both salespeople and sales managers, so they can kind of get a level set on, hey, how am I doing in some of these EQ competencies of impulse control, empathy, assertiveness, optimism. So I would encourage you, go to the website, explore, and take advantage of all the resources we have.
Thank you, Colleen. And team, I'm going to encourage you to pick up Colleen's books. So you can get these books on Amazon, wherever books are sold, of course. Emotional Intelligence for Sales Leadership, The Secret to Building High-Performance Sales Teams. That's Colleen's newest book. And Emotional Intelligence for Sales Success. Connect with customers and get results. Clearly, based on today's conversations, you're going to get value from those reads. And we're all lifelong learners, or you wouldn't be listening to the podcast. So pick them up, enjoy those books, give them a positive rating on Amazon. And team, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. Tell your friends. However, if there's something you heard in the podcast today, or you've got an idea as to how we can make this an even more effective tool for helping increase the performance and professionalism of sales teams, please let me personally know. My email is markcox@inthefunnel.com. I check that email personally, and we love constructive criticism. So give us those ideas where we can make this more valuable. And thank you so much for investing time today. We'll look forward to hearing and speaking with you next time.